Well, welcome to Great Sacred Music, welcome to St. Martin the Fields, welcome to those joining us online, and happy St. Cecilia's Day for tomorrow. St. Cecilia lived in the 2nd or 3rd century in Rome, or maybe in Sicily. When the time came for her marriage to be consummated, she told her husband Valerian that she had an angel of the Lord watching over her who would punish him if he dared to violate her virginity, one of the old romantics, but who would love him if he could respect her maidenhood. Small consolation. When Valerian asked to see the angel, Cecilia replied that he would see the angel if he would go to the 3rd milestone on the Appian Way and be baptized by Pope Urban. Do you think he did so? Apparently he did. Through her preaching, she had by this time converted 400 people, whom Pope Urban forthwith baptized. Then she was arrested, condemned to be suffocated in the baths. She was shut in for a night and a day. The fires were heaped up and made to glow and roar their utmost, but Cecilia did not even break out into perspiration through the heat. When the prefect Tertius Almachius heard this, he sent an executioner to cut off her head in the bath. This has all got a lot to do with music, you can tell. The man struck 3 times without being able to sever the head from the trunk. He left her bleeding, and she lived 3 days. Crowds came to see her and collected her blood with napkins and sponges whilst she preached to them or prayed. At the end of that period, she died and was buried by Pope Urban and his deacons. Yes, we never really did get to the music part, did we? Anyhow, her feast day has been celebrated greatly since at least the 16th century, and we are going to celebrate it in due honor today. We start, as we always do, at Great Sacred Music by singing a hymn together, which you can find on the inside of the sheets. Fred Pratt Green started writing hymns in retirement, and by the time he died became the most prolific Methodist hymn writer since Wesley. So there's hope for us all. Charles Villiers Stanford's tune, written for all the saints, had been superseded by the more famous hymn tune Sine Nomine. So Fred Pratt Green went in search of a hymn and adopted this orphaned tune, wrote a new hymn specially to go with it, which is now as inseparable from this hymn as Sine Nomine is from For All the Saints. We remain seated, the voices stand and lead us as we sing together. When in our music God is glorified.
It is as though all nature cried.
Well, we're now going to hear two pieces together. First of all, Sing Joyfully is William Byrd's setting of the first 4 verses of Psalm 81. These are verses which are an exuberant celebration of music made by a range of instruments, but it's curious simply because it's people singing about instruments: the timbrel, the pleasant harp, and the viol. Then we're going to hear Herbert Howells's hymn for St. Cecilia, which comes from a poem by Ursula Vaughan Williams, wife of Ralph, called A Hymn for St. Cecilia, praising the patron saint of music, written for the Livery Club of the Worshipful Company of Musicians to mark Herbert Howells's mastership of the company in 1959. The company once had control over all musical performance in the City of London. Ursula Vaughan Williams herself wrote, "My St. Cecilia is a girl in one of those magical gardens from Pompeian frescoes, a romantic figure among colonnades and fountains. Herbert's tune takes her briskly towards martyrdom." Well, we're going to flip now straight into the 21st century with James Macmillan's new song, a short anthem on text from Psalm 96, including inflections of Scottish folk music, Gaelic psalmody, and plain song, plus hints of the works of John Taverner, and concluding with a powerful organ postlude.
Sing unto the
Well, we're going to sing together again in a few moments, and I'd like to invite you to take a close look at the hymn we're going to sing on the third page of your handouts, because this is a fascinating hymn theologically and wonderfully. It now has a contemporary tune that's worthy of it. We're very used, I guess, as we speculate and we talk about spirituality, to placing ourselves in the center of all things and then looking out to the high heavens and thinking, is there a God up there, or how does the universe relate to us, or all those sorts of big questions. We practically never face the set of questions that John Mason here faces in the 17th century. He has what we might call angel envy. His big problem in his life is that he's not an angel, and he feels extremely inadequate about it. Now, there may be all sorts of reasons why those with us in the building and online feel inadequate about their lives, but I suspect there's not a single person here who's spent significant time thinking, I feel desperately inadequate because I'm not an angel. So that's because we're not living in the 17th century, clearly. So he's asking the rhetorical question, how can I possibly sing given that I'm not an angel? And he spends the first half of the hymn comparing himself with the thousands and thousands of the angels that are where worship really takes place. And he's saying, how on earth, on my own, can I possibly compare with the 10,000 times 10,000 angels celebrating God in heaven? And he continues in his rather miserable comparison into verse 2, and he does get a sound of God. You know, it's not all bad, but they behold thy face, so they get much, much more than he does. And then there's a transformation at the end of verse 2 with this wonderfully reassuring and comforting theological insight where heaven is but once begun. In other words, we don't have to have the whole of heaven. If we've just got where heaven has begun, and if you remember, you've taken an incarnational view that heaven has begun in the coming of Christ among us, then from about 4 AD, heaven has but once begun, then we can. That's the validation for being able to worship today. And then he's inspired in the last verse by this amazing discovery, which is a wonderful discovery and a very encouraging, reassuring discovery theologically and devotionally, that he recognizes that he can now worship with validity and integrity. And then he really goes for it in the last 4 lines, which must be 4 of the greatest lines in all of English hymnody. Thou art a sea without a shore, a sun without a sphere. Thy time is now and evermore, thy place is everywhere. So he's conveying that God can be in a particular place and yet limitless in space, that he can be now, but he can also be always. And it's perhaps never been more beautifully expressed, except perhaps once by Augustine himself, who described God as an infinite circle whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. There are all sorts of associations in this hymn. If you think of Samuel Crossman's hymn, My Song is Love Unknown, written just a few years before this hymn, maybe 20 years before this hymn, it asks very similar questions. It blends themes from Psalms 104 about God's majesty and 139 about God's tender concern for each one of us. Now, the hymn is particularly special to me. It was written in 1958, and it was written by the composer Kenneth Naylor, who taught at the Lees School in Cambridge for many years. Now, it's widely known that St. Martin-in-the-Fields has existed for a lot longer than I've been the vicar of it. But it's not so widely known that I actually had other jobs before I came to St. Martin-in-the-Fields. My whole life is not consumed within the circumference of this building. I did have a job before I came here. In fact, I had several, sequentially, not at the same time. And one of those was to be vicar of St. Mark's Newnham, which meant most days of the week I either walked or cycled the 10-minute cycle or the half-hour walk into Cambridge, And when I did so, I cycled across Coe Fen, which is the name of this, to the tune of this hymn, and is the name of the field on which the Lees School stands, and the field between Newnham and Cambridge itself. So, all reasons to sing lustily this magnificent hymn, one of the greatest hymns in the whole English language. We remain seated, the voices stand and lead us. How shall I sing that majesty? Now, we're coming towards the end of Great Sacred Music for this week. I hope you've enjoyed yourself. If you have, there's an opportunity to make a donation in the retiring collection as you depart. Do join us next week when we're celebrating the great hymn writer Isaac Watts, sometimes called the father of English hymnody. If you want a bit more of Cecilia, you can't really get too much Cecilia. It's really about musicians saying how wonderful we are. It doesn't get better than that. And you can have much more Cecilia on Sunday afternoon at Choral Classics at 3:15. And then it may not have escaped your attention, especially if you're an American, that Thanksgiving is coming up, and that will be celebrated on Monday, lunchtime at 1 o'clock. Do make your way to the box office after this, downstairs, and buy tickets for the Voices Christmas festivities. There are more than I can possibly describe, and they are more wonderful than you can possibly imagine. You can also find them on the website. Now, the big discovery of the day, I've already given you several discoveries, more about St. Cecilia's neck than you probably wanted to know, but the big discovery of the day is that How Can I Keep From Singing was not composed by Enya. I know that's big news. It was, in fact, an American folk song that began as a Christian hymn. The author of the lyrics was known only as Pauline T. The tune was composed by American Baptist minister Robert Lowry. Today it is often sung in a secular version that advocates solidarity in the face of oppression. Not originally a Quaker hymn, nonetheless Quakers adopted it and use it wisely today. We're going to hear a version set by Canadian composer and educator Sarah Cortell, who lives in London, Ontario, very close to where I was born. She grew up the daughter of a church organist and recalls that she was 8 years old before she realized that not everyone had a harpsichord in their basement. All kinds of deprivation are known in Ontario. Let's enjoy How Can I Keep From Singing, a beautiful and appropriate way to mark St. Cecilia's Day. Thanks for joining us.